is Keys to the Shop, episode 224, focusing on what truly matters, with Greg McKeown. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for joining me. And right off the bat here, I just want to mention that if you have not yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, go ahead and do so wherever you get your podcasts. If you can leave a rating or review, that's amazing as well. It helps the visibility of this show. And also, if you can share these episodes with a friend. If you get something out of this, then chances are you know somebody or a lot of somebodies that would really get something out of this. And so ahead of time, thank you so much for that. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers because they curate the best equipment from all over the world, and then they match it perfectly with the needs of their customers. Wherever you are in your business, if you are just starting your first coffee business and need to be outfitted with the right equipment, or you are looking to upgrade what you currently have or expand your shop into shops, like in your second store or third store, Prima Coffee can work with you to get the exact right coffee equipment for your situation. Anywhere from espresso machines, brewers, grinders, to restaurant equipment like under-counter refrigeration, they've got you covered. And when you go to the website, prima-coffee.com, you'll see the amazing selection, and you will also see that they put a lot of information on their website, a lot of free resources, videos and tutorials, blogs that will help you brew better coffee and use the equipment well, maintain the equipment well, because they not only care about equipping you with equipment, but also equipping you with the knowledge to succeed in specialty coffee. That's why I love working with them, and I think you should work with them too. So find out more information, reach out to them over at prima-coffee.com. This episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series, the world's leading plant-based performance beverage, because they work to develop these products for baristas and with a lot of feedback from the barista community. So you know whether you're using the almond, soy, coconut, rice, hemp, or oat on your bar, you're going to be getting a beverage that stands up to the heat from steaming, produces an amazing, silky, latte art-ready texture, and keeps the flavor balance of the beverage focused on the coffee. These are really important factors in helping your customers have the best plant-based beverage experience in your cafe. And when you're serving the Pacific Barista Series, you can rest assured that that's what they're getting, the best. To find out more information, go to their website, pacificfoodservice.com. Again, that's pacificfoodservice.com. If you're looking for the best plant-based beverages, then I'd say look no further than the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, well, today we've got a pretty big episode for you. I'm really honored to have today's guests on the show. Greg McKeown is the author of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. That is a Wall Street Journal and New York Times best-selling book. You've probably heard of it, and this book has made a huge impact on my life, and for a lot of you, I believe the same thing is true. It is frequently the number one book on time management on Amazon. It challenges our core assumptions about achievement and gets to the essence of what really drives our success. And like the title of this episode mentions, we're focusing on what truly matters. Greg is the CEO of McKeown Incorporated. His clients include Adobe, Apple, Google, Facebook, Pixar, Salesforce.com, just to name a few. His writing has appeared on or been covered by the New York Times, Fast Company, Fortune, Huffington Post, Politico, and Inc. magazine, and he is among the most popular bloggers for the Harvard Business Review. Greg has been interviewed on numerous television and radio shows, including NPR, NBC, Fox, and is a regular guest on The Steve Harvey Show. Entrepreneur voted his interview at Stanford University the number one must-see video on business creativity and success. Greg is also the host of the brand new, as of just the day before this episode came out, on the 22nd, brand new podcast, Essentialism. You should definitely subscribe to that podcast as soon as you possibly can. He's also a very accomplished public speaker and has spoken to hundreds of audiences around the world. And now he's here to speak to us in the specialty coffee retail audience. And again, I'm super excited and honored to have Greg on the show. And the topic, of course, of essentialism and focusing on what really matters is core to what will drive our success, especially in this time of uncertainty where we are just hungry for clarity. Essentialism and what we talk about in this conversation around that topic is going to be critical for how we show up for our families, for our staff, and for our businesses, and for ourselves too. In this conversation with Greg, we cover the genesis of essentialism in his own life and define what essentialism is. We talk about taking the first steps into practicing it for yourself and for your business and creating an environment where you can discern what is vital for you, your family, and your business. This conversation also teaches us a lot about how to cultivate creativity and gratitude, and how to practice the way of the essentialist in the midst of change. And in the times that we find ourselves in, this really is an essential conversation to have. And so without further ado from me, it's my honor to bring you this conversation with the author of Essentialism, Greg McKeown. Well, Greg, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
It's so great to be with you, Chris.
This is Essentialism is a book that I truly love, and it is the topic that I think is probably the most appropriate for the time that we're living in right now, especially for small business people. And I'm sure you've had a deluge of small business and business folks talking to you about this concept, and it seems like it's accidentally happened to us. Like we've had to get lean, we've had to get down to essential workers, essential staff, etc. But I'm excited to talk about how we can kind of make essentialism sort of a more purposeful habit in our lives. And I wonder if we could just start with talking a little bit about the road to essentialism. Like, what is essentialism? How did you really come to coin this? And I know it's from a personal and professional experience. Just walk us through that a little bit.
Well, let's start with the story. On the personal side, I got an email from my boss at the time, said Friday between 1 and 2 would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. She was expecting, otherwise that's a weird email to get. And we did go into the hospital Thursday night, and our daughter was born Friday morning. And instead of being focused and present on what was clearly the priority, I felt torn. How can I keep everybody happy? How can I, can I do it all? And therefore everyone will be happy. And so to my shame, I went to the meeting, and, I remember my boss saying, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And I'm not sure they did. I'm not sure the look on their faces evinced that sort of confidence, but even if they did, it's clear to me that I made a fool's bargain, that I violated something more important for something less important. Something essential was violated for something non-essential. And what I learned from that lesson was simple, and it was this: if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And so that launched me on a multi-year journey to research, understand, study, and now teach and work with companies and organizations around the world to figure out how we can reduce that gap so that we can actually identify what is essential, eliminate what is not, and create systems that make it easier for us to actually do what matters most over time. There you go. That's great.
I mean, that sounds like all of our lives have a story like that, probably from today, if we're honest with ourselves. When we're talking about elimination of the non-essential, your book talks about the vital few versus the trivial many. Talk about that a little bit, and why choose that way to put it, because some things they're always calling our attention and we feel like they're important. And it's hard to recognize them as trivial because that pull is there for us.
Yes, I think that's right. I think sometimes we mistake importance for the volume. If something is loud, if it's present, if it's in our face, then it must be important. And of course, sometimes that is true. Our health may be literally in our face. It's in our body. Things that are close to us can be indicators of importance. The people around us, our family, are the most important organization in the world. Right there, we can see them. I mean, biology can indicate prioritization, but it, of course, doesn't always. And technology hijacks that biology to some extent, signaling to our brains that the thing that we're looking at on the phone, because it is proximate, because it is right there within reach of us, because it's so close to us, it must be important. The email that just popped up must be important. It's right here. It's in our vision. It's in our peripheral vision. And of course, as soon as we say that out loud, we know that that's not the case. We know that just because something is on a device, just because it's within arm's reach, does not make it vital, does not make it important. In fact, it could be utterly and completely trivial to us. And so we need to do a little better, be a little more thoughtful about asking, is this essential, of the different activities and options that are available to us?
Yeah, thoughtfulness. That's something that doesn't sound like it's too much involved in how we react to the things that are pulling our attention away. It's a subconscious habit that we have to check our phones. I don't know how many hundreds of times they say or more. We do little impulsive things like that. And the way that we respond to those things seems like it bleeds over into how we respond to our families, to our staff, to our bosses. And it's almost like we're training ourselves to submarine our chances at success by eliminating the vital things.
Well, the problem is when we get the order wrong. I was at a 2-week executive education program, and we had really extraordinary people in the class. It was a hand-selected group of people, really interesting, and the people that were coming to us. This was at the Kennedy School at Harvard, and they had these great professors, and all for 2 weeks we were wrestling with some of the biggest societal problems globally. And it was this terrific opportunity to try and think about all of these with this great perspective of talented professors coming in, experts in their field, great conversation around. I was doing this right after I'd finished writing Essentialism. In fact, it was just before the book was published. So none of this was in the book. But my mind was very much in the essentialist perspective. And the more I listened, the more something really small and obvious started to dawn on me. And it was so small and so simple, I thought, if I observe this to the group, I think I'll seem naive. And basically the insight was this. I got the courage to share it close to the end of the program. And I said, look, as I've been listening to this, it just seems to me that we may have the prioritization exactly wrong. It may be that by focusing on everything out there first, all the problems out there, that we neglect to do the small and simple things that would really strengthen our families. And we leave last of all, investing in protecting the asset, us, mentally, spiritually, physically, the asset that we are. You know, so if I can conjure this now, I didn't say this at the time, I didn't have this clear then, but it's like 3 concentric circles, and the outside is other, all the other. The middle is family, and the core of it, the very center, is protecting the asset. Everything we were doing from that 2 weeks started on the outside and slowly, if ever, moved inwards. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This is really the way of the non-essentialist. What I said, the conclusion of what I said to them at this class is I said, it just seems to me that if we reversed the order and we focused on protecting our own asset first and then really investing in our families first, we would solve most of the problems that we've spent these last 2 weeks talking about out there. And to my surprise, that got one of the few and my only round of applause for that 2 weeks. So there I was thinking I was going to be seen as naive, maybe the only person to think about it in this way. And in fact, almost the entire group felt the same and maybe even had wanted to say a similar thing. In that little story is a key, maybe the world's simplest idea there, in fact, priority circle. Just change the order. That's it. Just change the order. Start in the center, protect the asset. Then move into investing in the most important relationships in our lives, in our families. And then after there, we select carefully the vital projects we want to invest our time beyond. And even there, we must be careful because there's only so much time and resources available. So we have to choose carefully and selectively. That switch of direction, that one, flipping the bit, is, I think, a good summary of the difference between operating as a non-essentialist versus an essentialist.
I love that story. That illustrates such like you say, it's a simple point and one that seems intuitive. You had been steeped in the writing of your book and in that mindset, and you got the courage to say what other people did not have the courage to say, even though it seems like from their applause they were, their agreement might have been something they've been already thinking about. But as is with them, it's probably true in general that we don't give ourselves permission to take action on what our gut tells us is wrong. Like there's an anxiety about life sometimes that you're working on things that don't amount to much in the end, and you see the other things crumbling. And anxiety seems key, and then recognizing that seems key in taking that first step. And you say it does take courage to take that first step and eliminate the non-essentials. I mean, what really tends to push us to take that step into essentialism, if we're going to, get the courage to take that? Well, how do we do that?
I think the first thing is really to face that we have chosen non-essentialism as our operating system. Most people who have taken this path didn't do it very consciously. They didn't say, well, do I want to take the path of the essentialist or the non-essentialist? In fact, they had no language for this at all. They just saw what other people were doing and saw their culture inside of the team or organization they signed up to be in, or they looked at broader society and what are they all doing. I mean, they just absorbed non-essentialism as the default setting. So my work begins with people. The very beginning is just to start this language, just to give language to these two options. There is the way of the non-essentialist. That's me leaving my hours-old baby and my wife, and as if there were no trade-offs, pretending I could just do it all and have it all. That's the way of the non-essentialist. And then there's the way of the essentialist, a disciplined pursuit of less but better. And when people see the two options, my experience is that universally they want the way of the essentialist. So there's no organ rejection about wanting that path once they see it as two alternative options. So then the question becomes, well, how do we do it? How do we actually consistently live this essentialist lifestyle that we now see as being a possibility?
Exactly. That first step might be a step where you feel the pain of having to drop the ball on something that you thought was vital, but turns out, and you knew was not vital. And that pain, I imagine for a lot of people, might even make them turn back to the non-essentialist perspective because they can't overcome that pain. Like it's too strong. The pull is too strong. So, what is, especially for us in small business, because in small business we have, it's a lot of times a small group of people. You're very relationally connected, and it's not just product. It's people, and so the pull is even greater to take care of your people at the expense of yourself or the business. And not that caring for people is wrong, but there's even more of that pull. So overcoming that inertia seems like one of the tricks that we need to learn. How do we overcome that?
Well, let's just go back to the beginning here, the idea of the priority circle. Let's just, draw it up. Someone could draw up those concentric circles, and they just keep coming back to the first circle. Just keep coming back to the center. Protect the asset. This is you. But not just you. It is you at your most discerning level. So this is you when you've had a good power nap. When you've read something that inspires you, that feeds your spirit, feeds your soul, so you're full of light. It's when you've gone for a walk or done your exercise for the day, you've played that sport that you enjoy doing. It's you when you are in a good and healthy place, and therefore can discern better. So that's what you're going for at first, is just these very simple behaviors. And out of it, it means that then you show up differently to your family because you have the energy and the strength and the recuperation to be able to be there for them, to be there with them. And because you do that, because you're investing in the relationships that matter most to you, because you can feel that this is being handled well, together as a family, you can be supportive of the work out there. So then when you say, okay, well, we're going to make an agreement. We're going to start this business. We're going to build this business. We're going to extend it in this way. This is the priority project. Here are the 2 or 3 things we want to do this quarter that really could move the needle. You're doing it with the full support of the people around you, the people that matter most. You're doing it with the confidence that you gain when you know that your secret life, that's the inner life, and your personal life, with your family are intact. You're able to then move into your public life with a sense of that confidence that, look, if this fails, I don't lose everything. If we can take a little risk, we can try something out. If it doesn't work, we'll change. We'll do something different. You're not putting everything on the line. You're able to reduce the overall psychological costs of trying something out in an entrepreneurial way. All of this grows out of getting that simple order correct. Alternatively, just think about the alternative for just a second. And it's so recognizable to people because I think it's something we all slip into sometimes, and may even be dominant behavior of our time. This looks like you start out there. Okay, I'm there's so many things I'm trying to do with the business. I'm frazzled, I'm feeling a bit frenetic, frantic. There's changes that are taking place. I mean, my goodness, uncertainty in the world. And this starts to consume you. You're living in your inbox. You're reading your emails all the time. You're a news junkie, and you're being consumed with all of this further uncertainty and just of cataclysmic thinking that fills so much of what used to be the traditional news sources. If you start there, then you can never, if I say it this way, it's like you can never win. That's an unwinnable game. You can't boil that ocean. You can't do all of that stuff. So you will be used up and quickly. So now let's say finally you close the laptop at some point, you get back out to your family, to the people that matter most to you. How much of you is left for them? What version of you shows up? How on a scale of 1 to 10, how positive versus negative are you in that interaction? Well, then how does that go? If you walk out of the office or you walk into a family dynamic and you feel full of negativity, worry, stress, what are you going to get back? How is that go? You will get an almost reciprocal, like a mirrored reciprocation. I mean, this will be almost identical to what you're putting out is what you will get back. It is rare that you can have an interpersonal dynamic in which you give out negativity, stress, worry, fractiousness, and you aren't going to get some version of that back. Well, then, of course, that can multiply easily. The contention rises. The conflict goes on. Okay, you want to avoid that. By the end of the day, you then finally get to that inner circle of whatever is mealy amount is left to somehow protect your asset. Well, it's not going to be high quality protection. It's not going to be great investment. This looks like an executive friend of mine admitted to me that at midnight, when suddenly the family is asleep now, that they'll be in their bed and they'll spend the next 2 hours just scanning through Zillow, as if they're going to buy some property. They have no time to buy this property. They have no business doing this, but this is their attempt at protecting their mental sanity. Well, it's not going to. It's not great. It's like the fast food of mental protection. There's no nutrients in that. You're not going to be fed well by that. And so all of that is simply a result of the order. And it's nothing else. It's not more complicated than that. When you get the order right, a whole set of positive things automatically start to happen.
I wonder if this time is truly a time that has forced people the world over into a similar situation that you found yourself in after taking that meeting after your child had been born, where you came to a crossroads. I do hear it from people that, especially when we're talking about business owners, they're saying, well, what am I doing in the future? Is this an opportunity for me to recalibrate how I show up in the future? Because we want to project into a new normal, as a lot of people are saying. But that new normal, if we're not careful, can come with the same problems that don't have to be there if we create, like you're saying, a system for protecting the asset, for starting from the inside out. Do you see this as being something that's almost like a global phenomenon of an awakening of essentialism, essentially?
I love that phrase, an awakening of essentialism, essentially. Yeah, look, I think the opportunity is there, an unparalleled opportunity. Never in my life have I seen anything to compare with it. The entire world, in a rolling way, it's not a single moment as COVID goes everywhere. The entire world is faced with this question, what's essential now? And it's almost literally that question. What jobs are essential? What is essential in my life? What can I live without that I thought I couldn't live without? What activities did I think I had to have my children in that I don't and everything's okay? What really matters? Yes, the whole world is involuntarily asking that question. And voluntarily asking it is different and is better, but involuntarily asking it is still useful, and still there's a possibility in it, and the possibility is that we say, oh, that's right, that I can choose a different kind of life. There was a YouGov poll in the UK that found that only 9% of people wanted life to go back to normal, the way it was before.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I completely buy that. Non-essentialism's a great con. It doesn't work. It isn't true. If you try to do everything reactively for everyone without really thinking about it, you will not produce a life where you get everything. I mean, that's the promise of non-essentialism. If you do it all, you're going to get it all. I mean, that's not what it gives. It doesn't provide what it says on the packaging. It provides a burned out, worn out person, a stressed and stretched too thin family, straining at the seams or broken. It's teenagers who, they're just on a race to nowhere. They're trying to outcompete people with no real sense of direction. I mean, this is what it produces. So it doesn't surprise me. I suppose I get why it might sound a bit shocking, but it doesn't surprise me that only 9% of people want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
But non-essentialism is not a great endpoint. It's not a great strategy. Essentialism is, of course, you would expect me to say it, it's a far better way of living. It's not just a different endpoint. It's a different way of doing everything that you choose to do.
It does seem as though all of the things that we have collected have been in a bid to try to achieve the essentialist result. And so, we have a judgment issue when it comes to looking at what is marketed to us, when it comes to how people market to us what a better use of our time might be, or what we should spend our money on, how we should, what our menus should look like, who we should hire, what our place should look like. We're talking about coffee shops, and we want the most success, and in a lack of being sure on our end, we say yes to the loudest things, and maybe what we think is most proven, but then it doesn't really add up. And it does seem like, yes, like coffee shop owners and other folks around the world are definitely in this place of saying, well, what do we do now that's more true to our soul as a business and as a person? When we look to the future and we say, okay, well, we're operating on limited hours, limited service and staff, and forecast into a year from now, how do we go about selecting what the vital few are in eliminating the trivial many? How do we go about selecting them when there's all this uncertainty in our world, but maybe even in our own decisions?
Well, here's what you don't do. Let's start with the opposite of the right reaction. It's to hunker down mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like, yes, hunker down for safety, but don't hunker down in all of these other ways. The status quo has been attacked, is being attacked. And my own reading anyway of this, and my own assumption, is we are never going back. There is no meeting back with that alternate reality. So the waiting, this is, maybe next month everything will be back where it was. Maybe the month after will be back where it was. I just don't myself hold that assumption. And I haven't from almost the first day of this, the Great Reset. In fact, that's really how I've been trying to think about this. We had the Great Depression. We have the Great Recession. This is the Great Reset. So in a Great Reset, you don't try to get back to something. This is the time to recreate, is the time to innovate, to try new things, to work out what might work in this reality, in this situation. And as I have a new podcast. That's been part of what I've been doing in the last month, is really experimenting and designing the Essentialism podcast. And I've been interviewing all these people. It's been a really creative, energizing experience for me. That's not the only project I have on. I have 2 major projects that I'm working on: a new book and this podcast. And together they have amounted to effectively the most creatively productive period of maybe the last 10 years.
Wow.
And one of the reasons I say that is that in interviewing some really interesting people, I have found that there are others that are doing the same thing. I was talking to Rachel Hollis on one of the episodes that will come out. Of course, this is Girl Wash Your Face and many other things. She has a 60-person business. The entire business is effectively in-person meetings. Well, that's it. That's over. Day one, that is gone. But she could bemoan that. She could wait for it to come back, terrified, or she's going to innovate. She's going to create something. She's going to work out what people want and need now. And so there's been this total pivoting of her business, and it's already started to work. She's already figured out, well, how do I do really high quality events online? So not just Zoom meetings, and they look, like every other meeting, but high quality work that's being done. And people have signed up for it because they're hungry. There's still people hungry. They're just not going to participate in the same products in the same way they did before. Something else she told me that I thought was amazing is that in the last 10 weeks, she wrote her next book and delivered it to the publisher.
Huh.
So,
wow.
Right, it is a wow. And I'm not saying anybody else listening to this, myself included, should do what she has done literally. That is her mission, her essential path. I only use it to illustrate the importance of being in a design orientation, to use each day to explore and experiment, and to look for what good is here, to look for what opportunity is here. I'm not trying to say something like the glass is half full. No, that's not the point. It's not whether the glass is half full or half empty. The point is what's in the water. and what can we see here? What is essential here? What value is here? And we'll find that there are things. They're different than before. Yes, the water's changed. What's in the water is different than before, but you can still look for, explore, and find things of enormous value that have been washed into the glass and build something that's exciting and new and really meaningful. And I really advocate for this at this time.
I really love that perspective. That it's energizing to think about giving yourself permission to explore the space again. And so many owners of coffee shops, for example, they open a second store and they give themselves permission to experiment more with that second store. They learn their lesson from the first one, and then the second store turns out to be better than the first one. Now everybody wants to work on that bar because it has a better design. It's a story as old as time, I guess, but I love the idea of using this as that opportunity for experimentation. And there's this need to do things that work to keep your business open right now. That people are doing things that they don't necessarily. They're vital for their business right now, but what's vital now, I imagine, it's going to shift in the future. As for instance, people are selling half gallons of cold brew coffee because they want to pivot into something that will give them a larger price tag. And that's worked for a lot of people. And it might not be vital for them in the future. I wonder, when we're looking at the criteria for what is essential right now, there's what's needed in order to survive that a lot of people are doing. And then there's what's essential. That's what you were describing earlier, that makes you glow, that makes you alive. And certainly keeping your business afloat will make you alive, but not in the same exact way. So, how do we approach balancing the necessary with the essential that gives life to our business and pushes us forward as people.
Yes, I mean, what we're always looking for is, as entrepreneurs, things that drive our economic engine, that also we are passionate about, that also tap into our competency. We don't throw everything out, baby out with the bathwater when circumstances change. We want to, at least speaking for me in my own business, I want to stay with the things I'm passionate about. I'm still passionate about essentialism. I'm still passionate about helping people to prioritize and reprioritize in order that they can use their time and energy and resources on those things that really matter so that they can operate at their highest point of contribution. Well, that doesn't change. My competency doesn't really change. That takes time for a competence to change. So you develop that competency. So you don't necessarily throw that out either. You maybe have to evolve it a bit, but you still want that to be pretty steady. What drives the economic engine can clearly change. How maybe your customers are even the same people as before. That could even be maintained or similar, but how you reach them is different. How you would meet their wants and needs to adapt. And truly, I see so much opportunity in this. And the way I would say it, like as a principle, is that if you focus on what you lack, you're going to lose what you have. But if you focus on what you have, you're going to gain what you lack. Always the orientation when you're into innovation, when you're into learning quickly, is what do we have that is working? Even if it's 1% of your business compared to before, but it's working, build on it, learn from it, and as fast as you possibly can. So talk about minimum viable product. Try something. Remember the power of asymmetric rewards. What I found was that essentialists just in general explore more than non-essentialists, which is a bit of a paradox. It's not what you'd expect, but they're looking more broadly, but committing in a deep way more rarely. So they're constantly reading, exploring, experimenting, trying. They're just not going big on every new thing, on every new squirrel they see. They're not going, okay, I'm going to devote myself, down this path. They're saying, let me explore, let me try. And an asymmetric reward is one that has limited downside and unlimited upside. So an experiment in an entrepreneurial sense is so many of them can be asymmetric reward scenarios. You just try a little bit. You make a small risk. You want a cheap mistake and learn. And you learn more by that kind of try something today, see what happens, what works, what doesn't. You'll learn more in one day of that than 9 months of planning. So you get out there and you try something. You talk to a customer today. I mean, when this thing went down, I reached out to a CEO friend of mine, just could I drum up business? Not at all. How is he doing? What's going on with his business? How tough is this? How is it affecting him? Out of that, I ended up doing a webinar for them, and for their entire company. But I wasn't trying to do paid work, and it wasn't paid work. I just wanted to be involved with them, learning, understanding. From that grew great insight, genuine helpfulness that has led to other paid work. So it happens though by doing these small bets, exploring what actually works, what doesn't. That's the way of the essentialist. And then of course you're quickly eliminating the things that don't work. You're not going big forever on things. You're learning. You're actually stopping things that aren't working. You're not trying to create zombie projects. But to me, this orientation is a good one.
It sounds like a combination, a success combination here is, in order to do this right, you need to slow down, stop, and get real with what's essential, and then you also need to go and explore. So like that slowing down, but then that going out there and taking those little risks like you were just talking about. It's just this balance between those two things. And that first part of slowing down is really difficult to do, especially in the urgency that we feel now and in general in business. So when we're talking about removing obstacles, for instance, to be able to do these things, to have the presence of mind to go out there and explore like the essentialist would, how do we begin to guard our time and provide for ourselves the space? How do we remove the obstacles to get that to start us out?
Well, let me just talk about the experience I've had recently myself about this. I mean, the first thing to do is to organize your life in such a way that the first thing in the morning is creating good mental, physical, emotional, spiritual energy, right? That you are really investing in that. It looks like being proactively grateful for every single thing that's working, whatever's going right, whatever you're learning. It's taking that mindset and then pouring that into the people around you. There are a lot of the people listening to this know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that their family asset has become a bit negative and a bit strained. And so, of course, how do they show up in their business? I mean, by the time they're working in the business, they're not in a place where they can be creative. And so, this is why we've got to get back always to protect the asset. Like literally, I bet for a lot of people listening to this, the thing they ought to do first is go and take a nap. And I'm so serious about that. It's like, just go take a nap. I'm not kidding you. They're bound to be not getting enough sleep. Bound to be, stressed all the time. The cortisol levels are off the charts. This all creates a mindset that's very narrowing, but not in an essentialist way. It's narrowing in a sense of fight, flight, or freeze. And so that's affecting then it further affects their relationships. It further affects their ability to make decisions. You've got to start with this mindset, of investing in self first, but it's not selfish. It's making sure that you can come into the day with a really positive, healthy, grateful outset. And really gratitude, I think, is as fast a way to do this as any I know. The most effective way I know is where the first thing you're priming your mind in the morning with is, what is one thing that happened yesterday I'm grateful for? You are actually asking yourself that question as you wake up. What is one thing I'm grateful for right now? I look around the room. What am I grateful for right here? What is one thing that I'm looking forward to today that could be interesting, I'm excited about? What's something I could be grateful for today? Then as you enter and you actually see people, I mean, honestly, I'm up before anybody else. I get up early and I'm writing in the early hours. So it's not that I immediately am seeing everybody, but I'm working on important contribution. When I see the people around me, we do a star game with our family, where it's called the family star chart game. That I really recommend to people because what they need to do is create this positive culture around them. This started years ago when our children were small, and what we would do is we would come up as a family with one thing that we were excited about, something rewarding. Maybe it would be going to the movies, or now in our environment, it might be, it could be a banana split party where we do a movie marathon of some classic movies. That's at the top of the chart. We divide the page just simply into squares, and for any time you catch anybody doing anything right, someone goes and draws a star on the chart. There's no names on the chart because it's not like a comparative thing. It's not competitive between the children. I have 4 children. It's not competitive between them. It's just anyone gets a star. Everybody got one. So everybody wins if anybody is winning. And so, it means it gives me and my wife Anna an excuse when we're with each other to look for the good. What's somebody getting right? What's anybody getting right now? Because of course it's easy to go into a room and find something somebody's doing wrong. Of course there is the 10 things that you might find. But this doesn't help anybody. This doesn't actually educate anybody. If you just tell people what not to do, what they're doing wrong, it doesn't educate them as to how to do better next time. So catching people doing the right is a far faster way to educate people about what you're really going for. And that's true, of course, in the business world as well. So a couple of other rules about this star chart game. You can't take stars away because the whole point is to build positive culture. Now, you don't want it to be positive or negative. It's just all above the line positive. And don't be stingy with them. In fact, we just instituted now, it's been years that we've gone into this, but now the children can give each other stars. They can only give one per day, but they can each give stars, including they can give them to us, which is the first time that's ever happened. And I'm telling you, it's educational when your child gives you a star.
I bet.
Because you start to understand what they value. So instead of doing the 10 things you're already doing to try to show that they matter to you, you can actually do the thing that really matters. And so this generates this positivity. There's a theory behind this. It's called, by Barbara Fredrickson, broaden and build theory. And it basically shows that positive culture produces all of these other positive results that you want. That's the summary. So it's causative, not just a correlation that's at play. Now, this is why you build that positivity within, that gratitude within, you express it without. That's just now in your family. And then you take that into your business place where you say, okay, what is going right here and what can we build on? How do we innovate in this new reality? And you're going to find what's terrific in my mind is that you're going to build new streams of business, new ways of operating that are relevant now and might be the relevant way have to be the relevant way for years to come. We don't know what we're going to deal with 6 months from now. But even if the return to some previous environment happens faster than I'm suggesting, you're not at a disadvantage if you've innovated a new way to do business. So as long as you haven't changed your values, as long as you haven't changed your competency too much or your passion too much, then it's fine if you've just found a different way to approach your customers that's really relevant for them. Well, great. You might end up with 2 streams of income where you had 1 before.
Well put. Yeah. And I love that game. I think I'll probably start doing that in my house too. It seems like an illustration of the kind of culture that you would want in a professional setting as well. Because you're right, we do have a propensity as managers and leaders to see what's askew and want to correct it. And if we're being honest, we're looking at that in ourselves. If we're trying to eliminate the non-essentials, we're looking at what's askew, but we're focusing so heavily on what is essential. So it's that positive culture of what can we do to fortify those things. And as you're speaking about this, I imagine, you're using the word culture. And those things, they don't just drop out of the sky, cultures. They're built over time. So it just takes, you do these practices of gratitude tomorrow, or you eliminate a non-essential and focus on an essential tomorrow. I guess you're not going to see the results right away. Imagine patience plays a huge role in this as you develop it.
Yes, and. I mean, of course, you're absolutely right. Culture is the current manifestation for all previous decisions. So your culture, you can't hide it for anything. I've worked with so many organizations now all over the world. And when I first walk into them, this is when I can see their culture the very best. After even a few hours in the culture, I can see it less well. But in the first moment, you can see it. It's just how people are with each other and with you. And it's not fully tangible, but it's not totally intangible either. It's observable. And what I've found, especially with gratitude, especially with catching people doing the right things, is that it can have a turnaround effect almost instantly. And so that doesn't mean your entire culture is transformed in a moment, but it means that the impact can be felt and observed really fast. Test this way. Immediately following this conversation, for the next week, every time you complain, fine, you complain, but after you complain, you say one thing you're thankful for. That's it. That's the change. That gets you to parity, right? That's just 50-50 now if you make that change. Every time you complain, you say something you're grateful for. And watch the effect. First of all, when I started doing this, I couldn't believe how many times I complained.
I was going to say.
And I thought of myself as a pretty positive person, a pretty, things are good and there's hope in the world and so on. I thought of myself that way. Nevertheless, when I instituted this simple practice, I found that I was complaining when I didn't even mean to be complaining. I was just giving an update to my wife or to someone in the business, and I would just present something as a bit of a grouch, as a bit of a gripe. And once I caught myself doing it and just said, I would even do it out loud. I say, I can't believe I just complaining. I don't even mean to complain. Here's what I'm grateful for. Here's something that's going right. I could feel the energy change in me, and I could physically watch it change in the people I was talking to. The instant reaction of, that's good. Something good to celebrate, something worthwhile. And so here's what we're going for. In fact, it's an interesting thing to me that it's so overlooked in Essentialism, in the book. Maybe that's because I didn't write it quite how I thought I did. But I think it might also be because of pre-wiring as people come to the subjects that I write about. The test of Essentialism, and there's more than one, but one meaningful test is whether you're experiencing joy in your life and in your relationships. It is literally for those that look, on page 8, the summary of the model. What is the result of Essentialism is that people choose more carefully so they can do great work. It's that they feel more in control of their choices. They get the right things done. And here's the final, experience joy in the journey. Because Essentialism isn't just radically eliminating stuff. It's certainly not just minimalism. It's centering your energy and focus on the right things at the right time for the right reasons. It's leaning into the most essential activities and relationships and doing it in a way that breathes life and light into those activities and those relationships. This is what Essentialism really looks like.
Brilliant. That is one of those things we all want. We all want joy from the day we started our shop, the day that we got the the keys to the shop, and everything was potential at that point. And at this point, there's all of that history there. The non-essentials have crowded out so much, but using that as a metric is so powerful. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because if we're honest, and I'll be honest with myself, there's a lot of things that I've allowed myself to start doing that have robbed me of the joy that I could have that aren't essential even today. And so this conversation is an excellent reminder in that. I am curious, as we wrap up here, what would you say to the community of small business owners out there who are in this, let's say, accidental great awakening, to be able to, go from here and parlay this into a purposeful pursuit of less but better, to be essentialists in their lives and businesses?
The only way I know how to answer that question is what I am literally doing to try to help with that right now. So, excuse me, it will sound like I'm just, could sound self-serving, but the fact is that I have been trying to work out how to do this, to be able to be helpful with people in an ongoing basis. And that's why the podcast is born. That's what gives me fire for the deed, is because what I've heard is that people read essentialism. They choose to be essentialists. They want to be essentialists. There's no gap there, but then they can get pulled sometimes almost immediately back into a non-essentialist way of being in their team, in their family, in their own lives. And so whereas I in my life continue to learn about new aspects of essentialism, I'm in conversation constantly for other people. They have the book, and then effectively they just then read the book again. And an agent in Hollywood just told me he's read it 17 times, which illustrates the point. So I find myself wanting now what's a way to address this? How can I be helpful? As I continue to learn and make mistakes myself. I don't mean from mountaintop, I've got it all resolved. I'm in the real world. I'm in this wrestle. And that's what that's why I'm so excited about this. I just listened myself. Nobody else can yet, but I just listened to the first episode, which is with my wife, because she's the most essential person to me. And I was re-listening to it. Well, I asked on social media too. I did say, who do you want on? And I got lots of answers. But the most popular answer, the one that got the most likes, was Anna. And that was great, because that is what I was hoping for. That's what I secretly was probably going to do anyway as my first interview. But as I was re-listening to it, what I found was I wasn't listening like, oh, how do I sound? Or how does Anna sound? I was just listening as someone who's trying to design my life around what matters. Just me. And I found myself going, I need this. I need to hear this conversation. I need to be reminded to ask, what's essential today? What's important this week? How can I handle all the rest of it, either by doing it or eliminating the rest so it's off my plate? And that was a moment of magic for me, because I know the kinds of conversations that I'm having with people in preparation for the launch of this podcast. It's amazing people. I mentioned Rachel already, or David Allen, or Arianna Huffington, or Tim Ferriss, or a dozen others. I know those conversations, but the magic in this moment for me was the imagination of every week, every Monday, having this I want to say drip, but that doesn't sound the right word. A spark of essentialism once a week. I just can see how helpful this can be, in my own life, and I wish it for other people too. So I really do encourage people to subscribe, to be able to, and this too for you as well, to find a design partner, and to go on this journey together, Chris. So, literally you find somebody, you bring your community, and let's work together to build an essentialist community, because I think the impact of this could be really immense. In fact, I feel confident it will be. So that to me is my genuine answer to your question.
That's really exciting. And I see so much of the value in that continual spark, and also as you were speaking, the idea of community and accountability, even that you could share with somebody what's going on with your life, and doing it alone doesn't seem like it would be as effective as doing it in concert with others who have the same values. And I think that's true for so many things in life in general. So really thankful not only for your work in the book, but for this podcast coming up. So definitely people should subscribe, and extraordinarily thankful for having you on the show today. How can people find out more? Where can we find you online?
You can go to essentialism.com is always a good place to go. Right now, that will take you. People can sign up for a free newsletter, and that's going to become a more and more active part of the community as we continue to build this. There will also be an online class there that's currently being developed that I think will be, right now you can take a class at Skillshare that I just launched called Simple Productivity. And that's, I think 10,000 people have signed up to do that already. And the feedback's been really positive, thankfully. But I can see ways to build on that further. And so I'm going to launch here. That's people don't, you're the first to hear that, but there'll be a class coming here shortly. And they'll be able to find that also at essentialism.com. So that's what I would say to people. Join the community, and we're going to build this community into something substantial. Build it one step at a time.
Well, thank you again, Greg. It was such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Chris, the pleasure was mine.
All right. Well, I hope that episode was impactful for you and that it spoke to where you currently are in your journey as a professional. There are a lot of great takeaways from this conversation. I am especially fond of the idea of not only cultivating space to find clarity, but also cultivating gratitude within our space, within our different stations in life, be it at home or at work. And having that mentality and help inspire creativity is so critical. So I hope that all of this conversation has been able to guide you to focus on what matters in life and in your business. If you have not read the book Essentialism, I highly recommend that you buy the book. Also, along with that, as Greg mentioned at the end here, subscribe to the new podcast, Essentialism. These conversations with people who are practicing this is a great supplement to the book itself. It's basically a community of people that through the podcast is being developed. And, just by listening to this show, how encouraging it can be to hear from people who are going through the same things that you are, or who have overcome certain obstacles or gone through certain challenges. That's the exact same thing with the Essentialism podcast. So subscribe to that show, get the book in your hands, and start your journey to focus on what matters and become an essentialist yourself. You can find out more about the podcast and the book and watch Greg also in different keynotes, etc. over at gregmckeown.com. That's a link you'll find in the show notes as well. Big thank you to Greg McKeown for being on the show. I so appreciate your work and your insights and wisdom and all you've done for us here on the show at Keys to the Shop. Thank you so much. Now, if you have any questions for me or feedback or comments, things like that, or if you're interested in working with Keys to the Shop Consulting to help you take your business and operations to the next level, you can just email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. I would love to talk with you. When it comes to consulting, we can schedule a call, a free exploratory call to see where you're at in your business, in your career, and what Keys to the Shop Consulting can do for you. So again, that's chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today. Thank you so much for joining me. It's my hope that this episode has really inspired you to focus on what matters. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.